Take a look at the phone in your hand right now, or look down at the shoes on your feet. For the last 30 years, we have taken a miracle for granted. We assumed that every year, technology would get better, shipping would get faster, and most importantly, everything would get cheaper. We called this the peace dividend. We called it globalization. We built our entire lives, our businesses, and our retirement plans on the assumption that the world was flat, borders were open, and trade was unstoppable. But I'm here to tell you that the miracle is over. If you've been wondering why prices have gone back to normal despite what the central banks promise, or why waiting times for cars and electronics stretch into months, it's not just a temporary glitch. It is a structural collapse. We are currently living through the first days of a new era. A darker, more fractured era where nations stop trading and start hoarding. Where efficiency is sacrificed for security. And where the price tag on that phone, those shoes, and your weekly groceries is about to permanently change. There is a pattern in history that destroys prosperity, and right now, we are repeating it. The era of cheap goods is dead. Welcome to the Great Decoupling. To understand why your future is about to get a lot more expensive, we have to understand the anomaly of the past. From roughly 1990 to 2020, humanity experienced a golden age of deflation. The Berlin Wall fell, the Soviet Union collapsed, and China opened its doors to the world. For 3 decades, the global economy ran on a very simple, very profitable formula. It worked like this. We took Western capital and technology, combined it with massive amounts of cheap Eastern labor, and transported it all using cheap energy and open sea lanes guaranteed by the U.S. Navy. It was a perfect machine. A company could design a chip in California, mine the lithium in Australia, manufacture the battery in China, assemble the phone in Vietnam, and sell it in London all within weeks for a price that the average teenager could afford. We became addicted to this efficiency. We stripped out all the redundancy. We didn't build warehouses. We built just-in-time delivery systems. We didn't build resilience. We built profit margins. We operated under the arrogance that major wars were a thing of the past and that economic integration would keep the peace forever. But that assumption was a lie. The pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and the rising tensions in the Taiwan Strait didn't just break the supply chain. They shattered the trust that held the world together. The global economy is no longer guided by the invisible hand of the market. It is now being guided by the iron fist of geopolitics. And when politics enters the factory floor, the first casualty is the price you pay at the register. This isn't the first time the world has seduced itself into this trap. If you could travel back in time to London in 1910, you would find a world that looked remarkably like ours. It was the first age of globalization. Steamships and telegraph cables had shrunk the globe. You could order goods from halfway around the world and have them delivered to your doorstep. Trade was booming between Britain, Germany, France, and Russia. In fact, the intellectual elite of that time were convinced that war had become obsolete. In 1909, a writer named Norman Angell published a famous book called The Great Illusion. His thesis was simple and seductive. The economies of the great powers were so intertwined, so dependent on each other, that a war would be economically suicidal. He argued that no rational nation would destroy its own wealth by attacking its trading partner. It made perfect sense. But humans aren't rational. They are tribal. In 1914, a single gunshot in Sarajevo proved that nationalism is far stronger than economics. The First World War didn't just kill millions of people. It killed the first era of globalization. Overnight, trade routes were mined. Capital froze. Borders that were once open were suddenly lined with barbed wire and machine guns. The global economy fractured, and it didn't recover its 1913 levels of integration for another 60 years. Or look at the 1930s. When the Great Depression hit, the United States panicked. In a desperate attempt to protect American jobs, Congress passed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, slapping brutal taxes on thousands of imported goods. It was meant to be a shield, but it turned into a sword. Europe retaliated with their own tariffs. Global trade didn't just slow down, it evaporated, plunging by 66% in just 5 years. This economic warfare turned a recession into a depression and paved the road directly to World War II. History screams the same lesson at us over and over again. When nations feel safe, they trade. But when they feel threatened, they decouple. They turn inward. They choose resilience over efficiency. And right now, the threat level is flashing red. So, how does this historical pattern translate to the 2020s? We are witnessing the breakdown of the 3 specific pillars that made your life cheap. If you want to know where inflation is going, you have to look at these 3 pillars. Pillar 1 is labor. For 30 years, we exported inflation to China. We used their billion-strong workforce to keep wages suppressed and goods cheap. But that demographic dividend is gone. China is aging faster than almost any society in history. The supply of young, cheap workers is drying up. Wages in manufacturing hubs like Shanghai are now comparable to parts of Europe. The days of the $2 t-shirt are ending because the people who made them are retiring. Pillar 2 is energy. The European industrial model was built on a lie that they could rely on cheap Russian gas forever. That pipeline is blown. The energy map of the world has been redrawn. Energy is no longer a commodity. It is a weapon. Countries are now scrambling to secure energy independence, rushing toward green transition or liquefied natural gas. These are better for security, perhaps better for the planet. But in the short to medium term, they are significantly more expensive than piping in cheap gas from a dictator next door. And pillar 3 is the inventory logic. You're moving from just-in-time to just-in-case. For decades, holding inventory was seen as a waste of money. Today, not holding inventory is seen as a threat to survival. Companies are building massive warehouses and filling them with months of stock, just in case a war starts or a pandemic hits. They are duplicating factories. They are buying from 3 suppliers instead of 1. This is redundant. This is inefficient. This costs billions of dollars. And they are passing every single cent of that cost onto you. This brings us to the modern battlefield. The buzzwords in Washington and Brussels today are friendshoring and nearshoring. It sounds friendly, doesn't it? It sounds safe. But let's look at what it actually means for your wallet. Friendshoring means we stop buying from the most efficient producer and we start buying from the most politically aligned producer. We are no longer asking who can make this the cheapest. We are asking who can we trust not to cut us off in a war. The most vivid example of this is the chip war. The modern world runs on semiconductors. They are in your phone, your car, your toaster, and your missiles. For years, we were happy to let Taiwan manufacture 90% of the world's most advanced chips because they were incredible at it, and they were cheap. But Taiwan sits on a geopolitical fault line. So now, under the CHIPS Act, the United States is effectively forcing companies like TSMC to build factories in Arizona. This is a triumph of national security, but it is an economic disaster. Morris Chang, the legendary founder of TSMC, was brutally honest about this. He stated that manufacturing chips in the U.S. costs at least 50% more than in Taiwan. In some cases, double. Why? Because U.S. labor is expensive. U.S. regulations are strict. U.S. construction costs are high. But we are doing it anyway. We are deliberately choosing a more expensive method of production because we are terrified of the alternative. When that factory in Arizona comes online, the chips coming out of it will be made in America, but they will carry an America First price premium. Multiply that example across every industry. Pharmaceuticals moving out of China. Electric vehicle batteries being mandated to be produced locally. Rare earth minerals being hoarded. This is what economists call structural inflation. It's not caused by the Fed printing money. And it can't be fixed by the Fed raising interest rates. You cannot hike interest rates to fix a broken supply chain. You cannot print a new factory. We are actively destroying the bridges that connected the global economy and replacing them with moats. And building moats is incredibly expensive. So, what happens next? If we follow this trajectory to its logical conclusion, the consequences are profound. We are heading toward a bifurcated world, a great split. Imagine a world divided into two distinct economic blocks. On one side, the G7 and its allies. On the other, a bloc led by China, Russia, and the expanding BRICS alliance. These two blocs will have different technology standards, different payment systems, and different supply chains. The internet you see might be different from the internet they see. The phone you buy might not work on their networks. The currency you hold might not be accepted for their oil. This is the death of universality. For the consumer, this leads to a scenario that terrified the 1970s, stagflation. We will see slower economic growth because trade barriers kill efficiency. But simultaneously, we will see higher prices because of the rising costs of production and energy. It is the worst of both worlds. The era of hyper-choice is also likely ending. You might go to the store and find that instead of 50 options for a product, there are only 5, and 3 of them are domestically produced and twice the price. The Walmart effect, where prices drop every year, will reverse. We will have to spend a higher percentage of our income on basics: food, energy, and transportation. But the most chilling consequence is the return of conflict. As the French economist Frédéric Bastiat is often paraphrased, when goods do not cross borders, soldiers will. The more we decouple, the less we have to lose by fighting each other. The economic mutually assured destruction that kept the peace since 1990 is evaporating. We are removing the handcuffs that kept the superpowers from swinging at each other. To wrap this up, I want you to understand that this isn't a conspiracy. It's a correction. We are correcting 30 years of believing that economics could supersede politics. We are learning, painfully, that national security has a price tag. For the last generation, we outsourced our resilience to save a few pennies. We enjoyed cheap goods because we ignored the hidden costs of dependency. Now, the bill has come due. The great decoupling is not something that might happen. It is happening right now, in the ports, in the boardrooms, and in the legislative halls of the world's superpowers. The world is becoming less flat, more mountainous, and much harder to navigate. The era of cheap goods is dead forever because the world that created it no longer exists. If you want to survive in this new economy, you need to stop thinking like a consumer of the 1990s and start thinking like a strategist of the 2020s. Understanding these macro shifts is the only way to protect your wealth when the rules of the game are changing. If you found this analysis valuable, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We are going to be diving much deeper into how this split affects specific industries and currencies in upcoming videos. The world is changing fast. Don't get left behind. I'm Economy Rewind. Thanks for watching.